Hello and welcome to the Cultivators Community Blitz event. This is event number 6 out of 7. And the Cultivators Community is a place where change makers, people who challenge the status quo, culture champions, community builders come together. We're the type of people who have ideas at our places of work, and we make our ideas happen. And today's event is actually, as part of the Community Blitz series of events, we're going to be talking about content creation, both from a community manager's standpoint. We have our featured guest, Diana Morgan, 2021 CMX Community Professional of the Year. She's going to talk about how her strategy that she used to create content and empower the community members to create content within her community. But before we get to Diana, as is tradition in our Community Blitz events, we have our own commercial to run. Today's event is brought to you by Unbury. It's a community intelligence engine that helps you clearly understand your community health and engagement metrics. For example, there's an engagement ladder that shows your community members charted out based on level of engagement, whether they're brand new, if they comment on things, if they're highly engaged, and if they're all the way up to event leaders and advocate status. If you are interested in a community intelligence engine for your internal workplace community, you can go to cultivateall.com/Unbury. Unbury. Sorry about that. And so, yes, like I said earlier, Diana, I want to welcome Diana. Let me see if I can spotlight her. Let's see. Diana, like I said, you've recently accepted the role of head of community at Copy.ai, where you're already making progress, growing your community and creating fresh content. You have a presentation that you're going to share with us today about your content creation strategy and how you empower community members to create content. And then for those of you in the audience here, the reason we're doing a Zoom call instead of a live stream today is we do want this after Diana's presentation, or maybe she'll even allow you to interrupt her. We want you to participate in the conversation. So obviously feel free to come off of mute and talk, or if you're not in a position to where you can talk, you can type in chat and either I or Molly will be your voice for you. But we definitely do have a few questions that we want to ask both Diana and the people in the audience today. And so we're definitely hoping that you can have a rousing conversation about content creation, what kind of content you like and what kind of content you would want to create. Diana, I'm going to hand it over to you to get us started and walk us through your content strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Hey, everyone. My name is Diana. I'm currently the head of community at Copy.ai. If you haven't heard of it, excuse me, we have a pretty good presence on Twitter. We're trying to expand our community as well, but we're a 7-month-old startup focusing on AI-generated marketing copy. So I'm sure that could help out quite a few people on this call. But I actually, since I recently joined just 2 months ago, I wanted to talk about my experience at UIPath, which was the previous company that I worked for almost 3 years. So that's where I'll sort of dive into user-generated content, how we formulated our strategy, what the results look like, and how to motivate your community to get involved. And I'm more than happy, since this is a smaller group, for this to be discussion-based, and you can definitely interrupt me if you have any questions or on certain slides and whatnot. And yeah, so let me share my screen. So just for a little bit of background, if you haven't heard of UiPath, that's totally okay. Copy.ai is way more popular. UiPath was an enterprise software company, and it was primarily used by engineers and developers. So definitely a different target market as to marketing tech and non-technical audience as well. So this will be through the lens of the developer community that I built and managed at UiPath. So a little bit of background on, what the UiPath community is. It was a very large community. So when I started back in November of 2018, we had around 400,000 people in our community. So when you think of that scale, the way that you approach programs, events, engagements is very different than, most people's communities are, a few hundred to a few thousand. And don't worry, that's definitely where I'm at today. So it's great to be back, at the beginning and sort of changing, what types of ways to get the community involved. And I appreciate the change. But This is sort of a general overview of what we actually did in the community, what we were able to create and provide for the different personas. And I'm a firm believer that there are customer personas and there should be community personas. So I just wanted to show that with each program and event engagement, it was a different type of person within the community that would engage, right? Our meetups were live events. We had our hackathons, which were software competitions to generate solutions. People were able to win prize money for the most creative project. And this really helped our product team understand where the product should go. Where is it failing? How do we make it better, right? Our forum, I think that's the most traditional outlook of what an online community is. And so we had a really great forum, always active, and a very high response rate to questions, and it became a really great support system. We also had our automation advocates. We were an automation company, so that would be our power users program, which we called MVPs, or most valuable professionals. But today, I want to obviously dive into content generation. Happy to talk about more of this at the end, if anyone has any questions. But today, I definitely want to talk about the blogs, tutorials, and reusable components that we were able to procure from the community and how we distributed it as well. Cool. So in terms of what actually happened right before I left, this was the presentation that I made in terms of how we started and where we ended. So we started the blog back in May of 2019, and this was up until April of 2021. So in 2 years, what exactly happened? And for our community blog, we had our company blog and community blog. And so our community blog, we never had paid promotions, we never had advertising. This is all organic reach and growth from an SEO standpoint, as well as targeted content and social media sharing for that organic reach. So in 2 years, we had over 83 blog posts. I would say around 60 of them were from the community. Over 172,000 page views to date, all organic traffic coming in from Google. And our average read time, which our blog editor said was impressive, was 4 minutes and 31 seconds. So just for context, an average blog post can be anywhere from 30 seconds to 1 minute and 30 seconds. So the fact that that's triple that amount of time really showed that people are actually reading the content and not clicking and bouncing out of whatever was there. So with that, we had to do a breakdown of what was actually happening. And this is where I was tasked with the project towards the end of 2019 to look at what have we actually achieved, what were we doing next for the incoming year. And so in 2019, we had 38 blog posts. In 2020, we had 45, which seems similar in numbers, but when you look at how it doubled over time, it's very clear how there was a change in what we actually did in our process. So some of the ways that we were able to actually improve our blog was that originally we were just posting content just to have content, which I think any SEO specialist will tell you to not do that. Any content generation person ever. And so we had to really fix up our strategy, right? So our priority became SEO and organic traffic, in which we wanted to category capture this specific type of automation that obviously had certain rankings in SEO on Google that would help us, provide the information that is needed, especially against our competition. So we would have Excel sheets of different keywords that our SEO team put together. And what I had to do was sort of, align this with certain community members to reach out to that would be interested in writing about said topic. So that way, it's obviously organic content, it was community made, and with it, their lens of how they use the product. One of the blog posts, how to filter data tables in UIPath Studio, this became a blog post that every sales rep sent to every customer. So this was also another way where we expedited organic traffic because it was so valuable and almost seen as documentation of our product. This was something that you could use to, send to the product team that's implementing. And we had some of the more niche ones where the read time was just insane of 6 minutes, 33 seconds, almost 7 minutes. I can barely watch a TikTok. So the fact that people can, read for 7 minutes at a time for a blog post, that was really impressive to show When we think about the strategy as well, I'm not sure how many of you work for SaaS companies or tech companies, and I recognize this is very much from that lens. But another part of our strategy that I wanted to share was, what was the actual content breakdown? If I was still there today, this is what I would have honed in on in 2021 in terms of the diversity of content. So as I mentioned before, we obviously had the SEO strategy. We had what different types of, in terms of when we started the blog, we only had 3 products in our product suite. So of course, naturally, all of our content was about that kind of, about those products. But in the 2 years that I was there, we went from 3 products to 20 products. And so not only did we have to retain our strategy, but I wanted to make clear, this is what we actually need to focus in on. We can no longer have just, 50 posts about one product. We now have to have at least 3 to 5 posts a year on the 20 new products that we have no organic traffic on whatsoever. Something that was also happened earlier this year was we had 50 new ambassadors, our most valuable professionals. And so this was a year-long program that they participated in where it was for their professional development, career building. And this was an opportunity for them, to contribute because they were obviously thought leaders in the space of how to use the product, the newer products in their specific perspective and use case. So we had people anywhere from people that were consultants, people that worked at 400, 500 companies. We had startup founders. So it was a diverse range of background and role, as well as we had probably MVPs from around 35 countries. So also very culturally diverse to show how much it was a global company. And yeah, so I think this is very valuable. I always like to talk about the logistics, and even if it may seem administrative, this is how we improve the quality of our blog content as well. When it comes from the community, in an ideal world, they would write something and we could publish it. However, with the company goals in mind, as well as making sure that we have the right type of content, as well as quality content as well. It went through many logistical checks that was definitely tedious on my end, but the output was worth it for everything. So I think where it starts off with is really, I talked about the SEO strategy, the topic strategy. So this is, engaging with the community, being like, what do they want to write about? Is this cool with the product team? And then they can write the first draft, right? And that could be anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, depending how fast the community member wants to move. The next section of what happens is going through all the reviews and checks. So when I first started the blog, I only had to have a developer check it for technical accuracy to make sure it wouldn't actually break the product, or I'm not an engineer, so I want to make sure that we had accurate information available in our blog. But as time moved on, our product team wanted to make sure there was multiple reviews of the product manager and the developer. We had product marketing check to make sure we had all the terms used correctly, the capitalization, even those small little things, right? Because it's organic traffic, this could be the first time someone interacts with our brand. And if, even that little smidget is wrong, it could have consequences that are very easily avoidable, right? After that, obviously grammar, grammar check, make sure that it's cool, especially since we had a lot of contributors around the globe. And English was not always everyone's first language, which is totally okay. But since we were primarily English-speaking company, we wanted to make sure it was grammatically correct for any consumption. And last but not least was editorial review and upload. So this could take up to 2 weeks for approvals. This was the hardest part, I think. I don't know if any person on this call right now will have to go through as many checks as this, but I think it's because I'm not an engineer. I could have fixed the first part, but as the company gets larger, depending on the scale of the company, I think these are where all these steps come in and slow it down, but again, make the quality of the content much, much better. After that, once that's all done, you uploaded it into HubSpot, set a publish date, and the blog post goes live. And that way we had channel distribution with our company channels like social media, internal distribution on Slack, different types of ways to send it out, sometimes in newsletters as well. And of course, for the actual contributor, we always encourage them to share on their social media because obviously they're the author. I'm sure they're proud of their work. And yeah, so that's a little bit about like how the actual process looked like for us, which I think, you know, in terms of the time commitment available, it's something worth thinking about when you want to prioritize something like this. So when it comes to the contributors of the blog, you know, we had so many different opportunities for people to contribute, to get engaged. And believe it or not, even though it seems like very little, 83 blog posts in 2 years, it still was a lot of work because, you know, when you think of everything else you have going on in your life, your full-time job, a lot of people saw this blog writing as extracurricular, which it very much is. And, you know, it could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months that I would get a blog post from a community member. You're going to have like a cycle of people or a funnel where you sort of like follow up and like, hey, okay, following up here, how's that blog post draft going? Or like, you know, keeping that wheel flowing and turning because not everyone will have the same timeline and whatnot. And also having like a backlog of posts is great as well because you want to have consistent publishing, but you may not always have the same, you know, same amount of contributors writing at the same time. So I would say, you know, when it comes to how much the community team wrote versus the rest of the community, is probably 10% of the community team writing maybe monthly posts or updates, some of the larger events and engagements that we had, some of our developer conferences. Of course, most of our content was written by our external community. I would say 80% was written by that, or partners as well, our affiliates and whatnot. So it was a very interesting rotating door of contributors, and some people wrote multiple blog posts because that was coming back to community persona, that was their way of contributing to the community. Like maybe they're not a speaker, maybe they're not an events organizer, but they wanted to write and they wanted to share that. And I think that's really important as a community manager to recognize people's personality traits and how they can contribute without, you know, pushing boundaries in certain ways. And of course, we had, once our community blog started catching wind, especially on social media, we actually had internal contributors participate in the blog as well. So when I started the blog, no one internally wanted to write. It was really a hard struggle to get buy-in from my colleagues, as in like outside of the community team. But as people saw the traction that these posts were getting, the recognition, we started having our developers internally start writing posts. Our product marketing team, that was more so for their actual role, but like they saw that there's enough traction and views for that to make it happen. And so I would say that was like the main breakdown of, you know, who is actually contributing writing to the blog and how this becomes a community program, since obviously the community team is not writing most of the content. And I think another question is like, what do they get out of it? What do they get out of contributing? I always advocate for professional development, personal branding. I think that's really important as a part of your career, to be doing different types of ways of putting yourself out there in the best way that you can. And that's what I mean of, you know, some people like to write, they may not be speakers, they can be both, but, you know, this is a way that, especially for a developer community where I wouldn't say it's not that it's not a social community, it's just there are very many different personality types and not all of them are extroverted enough to be speakers. And I think this was their outlet for them. And I think one that we achieved, at least with the UIPath blog, was since it's a developing technology, very new, it was thought leadership and professional development where their association with our brand helped them in their careers. So a lot of these people that wrote for us would get promoted, or, you know, they wanted to be seen as like, I know the most about automation, this is how I do it, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a combination of how well the company is doing or how new the company, what it's about, but it definitely comes back to personal branding and how people want to leverage it. And I think that's always a sell that you can tell people. And it doesn't have to be transactional, if that makes sense. I just think it's something to advocate for, and I really do believe in that. Or this is like the new way of professional development, for the digital world. Social media was really important for us to get this off the ground. So of course, community managers like myself, I had a team of 3 other community managers as well. So by no means, I did this program alone, but like I said, the size, I was not the only community manager there. That would have been ridiculous. And we had to have a regional split as well. But in terms of, social media presence, I've always seen it as a tool of how to engage and get the rest of the community involved. And so for the community managers, we would choose a unique hashtag that people can reference. For some reason, our community lived most on LinkedIn. I know that sounds very unconventional, but that's where everyone sort of engaged with each other. It's a professional network. This is for our professional community. And obviously it showed their personal and professional branding to a wider network than just people in the community. So I'm a huge advocate of also taking things off of community platforms or whatever you have maybe internally to sort of get, okay, this is what you've been doing. People know you're a part of it, but this is like proof that this is public information. Because when you think of virtual events, when you think of, the way things work now, especially post-COVID world, you have no proof of showing up because, if you're online, you are showing up. So social media should always definitely be considered as a part of your distribution strategy, as well as just visibility as well. These are a couple of platforms, Paperfly and Dynamic Signal. We use these at UIPath for a couple things. Paperfly is like, I would say, a corporate branding system. I'm sure there's smaller platforms that do this as well, but essentially you could create off of branded assets, like your own banner icon or social media like image that just made it more appealing to look at instead of whatever was just the wall of text that was there. Dynamic Signal was what we used for our employees as a company to distribute our content. So you just have an account. It shows all the content made available, and it's just automatic share to LinkedIn and Twitter. So this helped it out a lot because the social media team would insert captions saying like whatever the blog post is about, like 1 or 2 sentence caption, and people would just share it. And that already, you get 20 shares on one post. Even though we had over 3,500 people in the company, at least, there was a guaranteed 20 to 40 people that would share it outside of the community members and other contributors. So that's also something to keep in mind. I recognize it's not a platform everyone can invest in immediately, but this was a very strong value that our company had of organic social media reach and ways that we achieved that. So I think social media, very powerful, definitely changing, has been changing recently, but still, everyone can definitely use it, especially from a professional standpoint. I don't think there's there's too much harm in professional branding on social media. Yeah, so that's definitely all I have prepared today about everything surrounding content generation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Jeff had some prep questions, and yeah.
So let's go ahead and get started. Steve asked a question in chat and we didn't want to interrupt your flow there. But Steve did ask, a lot of people here today work inside larger organizations and they're building workplace communities, like an internal workplace community, not so much a client community, right? Or customer facing community. So what would you think, Diana, and then maybe even we go beyond and let everybody kind of add their thoughts as well, are the lessons from your work from an external client community that we can apply in recruiting or rallying volunteers and having them support our goals? So whether it's in there are certain things that are universal regardless of the type of community, right? So in recruiting or rallying people within the community to support the community goals through content generation, did you have any lessons learned? I think even in the beginning you mentioned it was tough to find people that wanted to write blog posts. What'd you learn to get them to write blog posts?
Definitely, definitely. It's funny that you say that because I think half of the time I was at UiPath, people thought I was an internal community manager, not an external one. So it's definitely, the misconception is definitely there. But also I would be looped into HR initiatives because they thought that. So I think one thing to always propose and encourage at any organization you're at is crowdsourcing. And that's something that we focused on a lot at UiPath internally as well, whether that was feedback or internal community building or just everything had an element of crowdsourcing to it, of like company community oriented initiatives and goals. So we were fortunate that that was built into the company culture instead of it just being, mandated down all the time of like top down management. In terms of, thinking about how to recruit and rally, I think there's always going to be 1 to 2 people that you have a better relationship with that would do it for you because of your relationship. And you need that to just get started, right? Just like how I said, it caught wind, 6 months down the line after I started the blog. It took that amount of time because I was consistently pushing out content from the community, and then people saw the rewards of the social media recognition, sort of the distribution, all of that, and that's what got people involved. So I think you definitely need 2 to 5 people to get started, and I don't think that's unattainable. But from there, just like how I said, it could take months or a few weeks to get a blog post. You need to continual recruitment and onboarding of them. So like anyone that you talk to, you need to loop in like, hey, okay, would you be interested in writing our blog? Or like, that was an interesting topic. Would you want to write a blog about it? It's not necessarily like at the beginning, you have to be very direct and like, please write me a blog, or would you like to write a blog to start a blog, right? But I think
so
as
more prescriptive in the beginning, like, can you write a blog post about this particular thing?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And in the longer term, it's more so like, hey, I'd love for you to write the blog post, or like if you're interested, we have a blog. Definitely feel free to like shoot me a note whenever that time is ready and whatnot. And I think that keeps the relationship open, it's relationship building, and yeah, you're still able to achieve your company goals.
Yeah. And I think even within, like, again, going back to like that balance between external and internal workplace communities, I think, again, the theory, the philosophy applies, right? So even internally, I mean, I'm looking at people in here who work at companies who have internal communities at your companies, whether you're the community manager or you're a member of the community, think about it as a member of the community. What would inspire you or motivate you to step up and say, yes, I'll contribute content for this community. Sometimes it might be, I just need to be asked, or sometimes you don't know that path created. And then there's, we're talking specifically right now about blog post writings, but there are other types of content that could be contributed by community members, depending on the type of community, a workplace community. It might be videos, it might be just creating memes, it might be creating questions and answers or things like that. So I'm gonna throw a quick poll up here. One question for our audience to even ask. Say, if you're a member of a community, whether it's cultivators community or your workplace community, what type of content do you or would you be like? This is the kind of content I know I'm good at creating, right? While you answer that, I'll also throw Molly your question, and if you wanted to either come off mute and ask it yourself, or if you wanted me to read it for you, you might
come off mute.
rephrase it. Yeah,
because I actually had something else I wanted to mention about. I think Diana touched on this earlier about like identifying subject matter experts, and I think that's super powerful because if you're recruiting people to help you create content, looking for those subject matter experts first. So my head goes to like, hey, if you're leading an ERG and within your ERG, there's community members who are, always coming to those meetings with news that's related to, your ERG mission. And that person always has is up to that current news cycle or whatever. Maybe you identify them as like, hey, it seems like you always come to these meetings with current news or new things that we can talk about. How about you take lead on a bi-weekly blog post about these news cycles that you keep coming to the meetings with. So something along those lines, where I just think that's super powerful to be able to identify people who are like super subject matter expert in one thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, as for my question, I think you totally answered it.
I was just going to add that the way that it only worked in terms of the less aggressive onboarding for the blog was because we had such event and program heavy engagements throughout the year. So it could be in passing, even if it was virtual, or like on one-on-ones as well with the community. Sometimes it was just, if I didn't have those events or programs to sort of like in passing say that, I would have had to have a much heavier lift. But because I was so involved, so open and engaged, that I viewed it as a passive like onboarding process. If we didn't have as many events, I think I would definitely have to like recruit more on the forum, or be like, oh, this is a great like contributor to our forum, writes a lot of lengthy answers to the questions. But yeah, it definitely took time. And I forgot to mention this, but we also used our MVPs, our power users. We beta tested it with them first because they were already experts. They already knew how to use our product. We already had relationships with them for at least 6 months at that point. So it's easier to get them to start it, which can be very difficult at the beginning.
And again, I'm going to bring that back to internal, the application to an internal workplace community. That might be your veteran staff or your ACE employees or your people who have best practices, right? So every community has different types of members, and whether they're the movers and shakers or the most highly engaged, that's kind of where you go. And again, we had one of our earlier community Blitz events topics was identifying the leaders in your community. And so this is kind of like the next step. Once you've identified them, you do have opportunities that you can give them that gives them a voice or a bigger role, a bigger presence in the community. Some of them might help plan events. Some of them might create content for the community. Calvin mentioned as well, like in the poll, we didn't have like Slack comments or something like that, right? So there's other ways to be engaged, right? I just threw a couple of the most common media types, I guess you could say. Another question came from Edmund, and Diana, I'll throw it at you since you're our featured guest, but really this one is, I think, appropriate for anybody to come off mute and help answer, almost like a group conversation topic. But kind of like, what's the biggest red flag that you've identified around companies adopting a community content creation initiative? And so again, whether that's internal, external, and Edmund, if you even maybe want to clarify, or I'll attempt for you, I'm assuming that's kind of a red flag, meaning you might go to whoever the decision maker is and say, hey, rather than just the CM, community manager, creating content, we want to let the community just come up and create content and share it, because it's risky to do something like that, right? So where's the red flags, and how do you overcome kind of somebody who's maybe a little more risk averse? Is that appropriate, Edmund? Do I have your question right?
Yeah. Hi, Jeff. Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's just about right. To even make it simpler, the question really comes down to the difference between the results of someone, like Diana, with experience now and intuition around doing this versus the best laid expectations, and how essentially company structures kind of get in the way of those best laid intentions or results. And those are the red flags I'm asking about.
Yeah, good to see you, Edmund, by the way. One thing, I love this question because I think it can go two ways. So obviously, our community blog was a side project that took off and exceeded our expectations. I wouldn't say that's the best way to go about it through strategy, but it also showed that we had other priorities, and we still had like company-made content that was about selling. It was about our customers. It was about a completely different audience and methods behind it to do that. So what we focused the community blog to be was just completely organic content. It was what the community wanted to write about with certain approvals, but it wasn't about selling anything. It was just like, this is how I use it. This is resources. These are information for people to be able to use our product. So to me, I think what would have been a red flag, and this could have happened in the time that I left because it was gaining so much traction, is that they wanted our community to start selling our product. I think that's where things go wrong. Because just because you have that visibility, just because you have that distribution, that's not a good thing, you know, for the company to just like exploit that, if that makes sense, because it has the origins of being organic. I think on the other end, if you only have a community blog and that's what you start off with, it's obviously going to have to expand, but I think that's where you need to sort of, again, make those boundaries. This is a company blog, this is a community blog. And we actually had separate URLs for each one, just so that people would not get confused. So yeah, I think that would be where I would focus on that right now. Even at my current company, we're about to start our blog. We very much have a company blog, and we've established that we will have a company blog and we will have a community blog, and we're keeping them separate. So again, we'll have to talk in 6 months about the results, but as of right now,
special.
Yeah, as of the startup I'm working at, you know, what we're focusing on and how we're structuring it, we have kept them separate, and I think that will be a good starting point based off the company and our goals and whatnot.
So is there anybody here in the audience that is a member of your workplace community, right? Or one of the communities in your workplace where the community members don't have an opportunity to create content that, and I'm going to kind of qualify this. I think always there's community content to be created within the community that stays within the community, because that's what a community does, right? So I guess the real question is, are you a member of a community where you create content that's not allowed, quote unquote, to leave the community and go public, right? So whether it's a community blog dedicated to that, or maybe it's, does your content get shared externally by the company? Is your community almost mined for content that the company then puts out there? And the reason I ask that, and if there's anybody here, you can type in there, you come off mute and say, yes, I'm a member of that type of community. Because I want to have a conversation a little bit about how can you advocate so that the community content does get shared. And then if there are nobody like that, then maybe you are a member of a community where the company can use the community content, share it publicly. LinkedIn, great example, right? Or YouTube videos or things like that. How can you help the company share? Like, how can you help create content yourself if that's something you're interested in? Any feedback on that? Any answers to that? Any comments on that? If not, I know that's that might be a really hard question that I posed there. But while we wait for answers there, since it's quiet, I guess I maybe have stumped everybody. Diana, I did have a question to kind of follow up with you as well. You mentioned that the biggest part of community generated content is relationship building, right? So you as the community manager building the relationships with the members of your community and earning their trust. Can you go into any of the details about kind of like expectations? How long does that take? How do you build those relationships? And then again, thinking of it from the standpoint of, we have community members, not necessarily that are in the audience, not necessarily community managers. For those community members, what could they do to let it be known to their community managers that, hey, I want to create some content for us? Yeah,
great question. So I think one thing that's really important is recognizing what people want. I think that's something any community manager will have to figure out one way or another, of how they, can meet different people that, want different things. And that's why having a bunch of different programs and events and engagements is really helpful, because even if someone doesn't want to be a speaker, you'd be like, hey, well, do you want to do a hackathon? Okay, you don't want to do that? Oh, do you want to do a blog post? Like, you just have like that kind of flywheel of this is how you're going to be involved and I'm enrolling you, you know? So one thing that I realized was lacking in our community was the long-term benefits of being involved. And what I mean by that is like, you know, this comes back to sometimes communities can only be seen within the community, and that's totally okay. And that's great for certain environments. But I think for professional development, it needs to get out of this is how it helps me on my day-to-day job, whereas like this is how I can excel and grow my career. So the people that I sought after at first were people that I saw were like, you know, maybe don't want to do events all the time, still want that career progression, wanted something that's a little bit more tangible than having done an event at one point, because it's the link, it's the backlink to something you did. And community blogs, I don't think are really deleted off websites, but or off the internet. So, you know, it was one of those things where I really thought, you know, this will help them in some type of way and in how they want to use it. And I think the other one is people will come reach out to you. You'd be surprised with how many people reach out to you, you know, when you just have community manager in your title. Just anyone, like when I was like, yeah, people just add me, ask questions about sales, about anything. And I was like, you know, I'm the wrong person for this, but I will connect you to someone, right? Just because they know I would respond at least. But some people will ask about it. They want to contribute. And I think the brand association is really important of how people, you know, wanted to associate themselves as well. So in terms of developing the relationship, I think it's all about the trust, being able to deliver, being able to promise certain things. And that's what I did on my end of like logistics, timeline, you know, doing that. I can't promise people promotions and, you know, this is what's going to happen to you if you write a blog post. More so just like, this is a stamp of approval that you're a part of this community, you contribute to this community. And that was a sell enough, aside from the developing relationship that I had with these people to be like, you know, let me loop you in on this. You need to be connected with this person. You know, always adding value back to the community member of being involved.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so to the audience, you know, are those motivators, right? And are there any other motivators? Type in chat, you know, is professional development, personal growth, you know, professional networking, are those motivators when you decide I want to create content within any community, right? And whether it's the cultivators community or your internal workplace community, you can type in there, like, yeah, like if yes to those items, or if there's other motivators. I mean, maybe it's just like as a hobbyist, I love making videos, so I just want to do that because it's just video editing is something I like to do, right? Or, you know, live streaming, or I mean, even the poll we just launched while you were answering there, video, like when I think the poll question was what type of content you prefer to consume within a community, and the winning answer, right? The answer that got the most votes was videos over events, right? Or over blog posts or over this and that. So interesting, like people want to consume video rather more so than anything else, at least within this community, right? Small litmus test. So if you know, consuming the video is different than creating the video, right? And so I think obviously your audience shrinks as far as who would want to be involved in creating a video. But yeah, I think it's interesting when you're thinking about from the community manager standpoint, you know, should the community manager create more content than the community, the same amount of content, less content? Like, where's the balance, right? Any thoughts on that, Diana? Like, as you as a community manager, what's your goal? I know, like, when you start a community, you're probably creating more than the community. How do you kind of like tip the scale so that it's either balanced, or you actually are creating an environment where the community members are creating as much of the content or more?
I think you just have to crank it out for months and consistently post. And once other people start posting, you start backing away from posting as much, right? Because that's ideally, I'm currently doing that in our Facebook group, which is where Copy AI's community lives right now. Not the best platform, obviously, but you also have to grow the community to get, you know, a real platform at some point. But in terms of, you know, consistent posting, people also recognize you as the community manager. I think that's really important in establishing that, because once people stop start posting, you like and engage and comment on anything that you can, propose new things, ask questions. So I think that's really important. But I would say it takes at least 3 months of consistent posting before other people start catching wave of it, because it takes time for them to create content too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like most people do not post on social media every day. And so, especially when it comes to professional social media, that's even less. Professional accolades, or, so this is what I'm saying of building out those timestamps for people to, color their resume or their career for personal branding. So that's how I look at it. That's how I utilized it, I guess you could say. And then people started creating their own YouTube channels. That could be a whole other call, but we sort of had to say, like, this needs to be branded as like, this isn't even UIPath Community. This is a self-made account, but you are part of the UIPath community, or like you contribute to it. Because that can get really messy when people watch videos through other search engines, not through the social media platform. And there can be confusion of, this is a legitimate UiPath owned account.
Yeah. And I think in an internal workplace community, like a lot of your staff, right, employees or whatnot, may hesitate to create content until they see that it's a safe place to do it, because especially in an internal place, you don't know, if I post this, am I going to be viewed a certain way? Is it going to be a career limiting move, or am I going to be judged, or am I going to say the wrong thing? I mean, there's a lot of things that people, I think, have to consider. So I think whether you're a community manager or not, stepping forward, sharing content, helping to create that safe environment for your community members, or for your fellow community members in a workplace community, it can help more people create content. So again, like we've always said, be the leader, be the first follower, be the person who actually steps forward and lets everybody see that, hey, whether you're community manager or not, this is a good place, and you're a leader in that community. If you're here in the Cultivators event, you're a leader in your community. Trust me. All right. So we are out of time for the day. I am going to post a quick poll here about event feedback. It's one question. While I do that, I will kind of let everybody know, if you're not in the Cultivators community, just send me a message and I'll send you an invitation, or you can go to cultivateall.com/cultivators. We're going to continue this conversation this week in our Slack community, the Cultivators Slack community. And I do hope you'll join us next week, same day, same time, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, for our final event in our Community Blitz series of events. It's going to be a show and tell, where members of the Cultivators community are going to show and or tell us about their different communities that they belong to. And these might be workplace communities, they might be hobby communities. It doesn't mean, the goal of that event is to show that no matter what type of community it is, there's certain elements that apply, and just the type of community and the platform that the community engages in, that those elements are just skinned differently. They're themed differently or whatnot, but there's certain things that work in every community. Molly, if you haven't already, if you could, which I see you did actually, Molly posted a LinkedIn link in chat that you can RSVP to attend that event. And then on Monday, as I've done for each of our events, I'll send everybody a calendar invitation so that you can put it on your calendar. In the meantime, I will thank everybody once again for joining us, and never stop changing.